Go.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Mission Driven Made podcast. We have a very accomplished guest today, so make sure you stay until the end. Our guest earned his medical degree from Eastern Virginia Medical School and is a certified strength and conditioning specialist, has been a USA weightlifting club coach for over a decade, is an elite power lifter who holds one of the top 20 totals of all time, and is the founder of Barbell Medicine. I want to welcome Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum to the high achieving community and Mission Driven Made podcast. Thank you for being on the show, Dr. Feigenbaum. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So I kind of wanted to do today a little bit different and work backwards as far as some of your accomplishments. So if you can kind of tell us what Barbell Medicine is and how it all came to be.
Sure. So Barbell Medicine aims to integrate the best of modern medicine with the best of the strength and conditioning world, and vice versa. So melding those two worlds together. They're very separate. This came to be out of my background as a strength and conditioning coach. I started doing that after I graduated from college. I had a 5-year break between college and my starting medical school. So I owned and operated a gym. I was the director of education for this large personal training company. So I was training coaches how to be better coaches. In any case, ended up in medical school and obviously still passionate about training. I was a competitive powerlifter at the time. So during the medical education, the recurring theme was, yes, lifestyle factors are important. Exercise is important. Diet's important, but there was never any sort of teaching education about that, which sort of just highlights the problem in medicine from those things. We all recognize that lifestyle is super important to long-term health, but we almost pay lip service to not only learning about it, but also being able to recommend it, counsel people effectively to change their behaviors. And I think it just starts with fundamentally like, okay, well, what are the current exercise guidelines, for example? Why are they there? How do we come to this? What are the current dietary guidelines? Where do they come from? Why is this important? And then the behavioral change stuff is layered on top of that. You have to have the fund of knowledge to layer on additional complexity. And so I kind of recognized that like, the strength training stuff that I know would be useful here. And then the medical stuff that I'm learning would be useful over there, because the strength and conditioning coaches and the health and fitness fields, they either reject everything medicine in favor of like kombucha and, fit teas, or are aware like, wow, yeah, a lot of my clients have high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, this, that, and the other, and they just are scared. They're like, I don't know how to navigate this. It's too risky. But so 50% of the United States has high blood pressure, right? And only half of them are adequately managed. So
it's 50%.
It's 50%. Yeah. And it's going to be 2/3 in like the next 5 or 10 years. So yeah, in any case, huge problem. And so if you're training folks, you're likely training people with medical conditions. And the idea is we don't want to underdose the exercise or give them the inappropriate dose of exercise to the extent that exists. And so, yeah, long story short, the medical community needed the fitness industry and the fitness industry needed the medical community, but nobody was like bridging that gap. And I was like, again, just this self-inflated ego. I was like, I'll do it. I mean, I don't know anybody else that's doing it. And it's true. Nobody else was kind of like doing that. So I bought the domain barbellmedicine.com. I ran it by my then girlfriend. I was like, yo, the name's going to be Barbell Medicine because I like barbells. I like medicine, smash them together. And then I'm going to have a slogan, and it's with you from bench to bedside. And that's just a play on translational research where you take an idea like a medication, specific intervention or whatever from the laboratory bench, and it gets translated through multiple studies, iterations of studies to the clinical bedside. So with you from bench to bedside. And she goes, it's a dumb name, dumb slogan. It's never going to work. And I was like, we broke up instantly. But the point is like, now, do I have to send her an email now? Like, hey, see, now who's laughing? No. So I bought the domain, I just started writing content. And it was so interesting because I was in medical school and these national organizations were like contacting me like, hey, would you like to do some consultation work, for us for revising these exercise guidelines? We feel like you'd be a great addition here. And then people were also like, oh, you're a doctor. I have these medical conditions and I want to exercise. Like, could you coach me or like talk to my coach? And I was like, maybe there's like a business here. because I didn't think
Yeah.
so initially, right? Outside of like, I've been coaching before, I know how the coaching business works. I can coach people, but I didn't think that it was going to like transcend both fields kind of like that. And so that was 2012. By 2016, we had, over 40 plus different contractors, so other healthcare professionals, fitness professionals, marketing, like the whole deal. And now we're double that. It just keeps going. If you would have asked me almost 10 years ago when I started this, like, what's Barbell Medicine's trajectory? I would have said, it's probably a personal blog. It's a pet project. I just want to put out good information to help have resources for the medical people in the medical field and people in the fitness field. And if they use it and people get better and healthier, cool. But it's been, that's how Barbell Medicine came to be. And it's grown since then, which is good.
I don't think I've personally seen any other companies or brands that are doing what you guys are doing. And I remember when I first found you guys a few years ago, I was amazed. I was like, I've never seen anything like this. Is there anyone else that's really doing what you guys are?
They're not in the the actual medical field. And when I say actual medical field, I don't want people at home to be like, it's just an arrogant doctor. Like, I'm arrogant, but for other reasons. I try to avoid that. There's in the actual medical field, so like either physicians, so MDs,
Right.
DOs, nobody's really doing this like putting out, and when I say this, I mean putting out free resources to help the medical professionals or help fitness professionals integrate from one side to the other. Nobody's doing online courses, nobody's doing in-person seminars for that reason, or for that purpose. There are like physical therapy companies and physical therapists and chiropractors that are doing some of the pain and injury stuff at similar levels, which is good, and at lower levels, which I don't really love. But it's still nobody in the space, which is again cool, but that could also mean that maybe there isn't as big of a need as we thought, and so one company will suffice, and we'll be that company. But given the trajectory of the business, I don't think that's the case. I think that we're just fulfilling that need right now, and it's really hard. Like, I don't know a lot of other physicians who even lift, right? And I don't mean that in any sort of way other than I just don't. I know like a handful of them, and I think that's all of them. And then, okay, so then you need to be a physician who trains and then has coached others and then has a lot of free time where you're not practicing medicine and has an interest in building your own business as an entrepreneur. And it's like,
right,
those things just don't work, right? So I don't know, maybe I'm the unicorn, or maybe it's just, and I obviously got lucky with timing and opportunities and this, that, and the other, but I agree. I haven't seen other people doing this in the space.
And you kind of went into this a little bit a few minutes ago, but the part that I've never understood, especially after finding you guys, is how did that gap just get so big? Because
sure.
To me, it's like makes perfect sense combining those two things. Like, I can't think of anything better personally.
Yeah. To answer honestly, I don't know the exact answer. My thoughts are this medicalization of fitness, which is effectively like there are specific exercises, volumes, types, etc. That started with Dr. Kenneth Cooper of the Cooper Institute. He basically was the first one to be like, if your aerobic fitness is not this high, you're at increased risk of heart disease, premature mortality, all these other sort of things. And at that point, that was I want to say it's in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so that's the first time like the medical field kind of entered exercise. And I agree, at that time, you'd figured, cool, we're just going to marry these things together. And what it seems to do is almost like split. There were people in the medical fitness realm that are like, we're going to study VO2 max of patients with heart disease. We're going to study, how many METs can a person who's previously had a stroke put out on an exercise bike, and hand grip strength in like older individuals, which is like siloed from the strength conditioning field, where it's like, okay, so we're going to teach people how to squat, bench, deadlift, or use machines or kettlebells or dumbbell, whatever, get them stronger, build muscle, etc. And there are researchers in that space too that are like, okay, here's how you optimize or improve hypertrophy outcomes. Here's how you improve strength outcomes. Here's how you, but they just don't talk to each other. There's nobody that's transcending this. And so they're like siloed. And I don't know why, other than the fact that I think the physical culture scene, so Arnold and Franco and all that
Yeah.
stuff, sort of developed way before and separately than the medicalization of fitness. And so they just didn't talk. They just didn't talk. And as both fields have grown, you would expect them to overlap more and more, but they just don't. And even the academics, really, like there are academics in the hypertrophy scene and strength world. They don't really get into the health stuff, and I don't think it's because they don't care about health. I just don't know if it's interesting to them or their careers have been on this trajectory. I don't know, but I don't. You see the same names pop up from scientific papers over and over and over again in specific fields, and I'm still waiting for the crossover. Like, where's the mashup? And yeah, it's interesting that you would think that again they would have overlapped at some point, but not yet.
Yeah, they're really polarizing, almost kind of like you were saying. And then as far as like developing your brand, I know you said it kind of started off as more of a blog, but while it started growing, was there any, I guess you could say, headaches or stuff you faced that was really challenging that you had to work through? A lot of our listeners, are future entrepreneurs and, building their business. So if you could kind of go over that.
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest thing was trying to establish or figure out like what was our ethos? What are we trying to really do here, right? Are we trying to leverage our medical credentials and that niche to be like, yeah, look, we know more about exercise and fitness and stuff and can read the research better than your strength coach. So we're just going to be the best strength coaches. And it's like, nah, we don't want to do that. Or do we want to be, the docs who lift and we'll be your doctors, because you like lifting, we like lifting, we'll be the docs who lift. Nah, we don't want to do that. But it took a while to kind of figure out like, well, what are we really doing here? What's our niche? What's our brand ethos? So if you look back at like a lot of our initial material, it's all over the place. It's like how to best improve your squat. It's like, what? I mean, on the one hand, we have experience in that with coaching and personal experience and stuff, but who's that helping? Right. And then we'll have articles on like sarcopenia guidelines in clinical practice. And you're like, okay, there are full on like international, multinational working groups who get research grants of millions of dollars to study this topic. There are guidelines that exist. Like, what are we doing here? Like, so trying to find like where exactly is that fence to straddle and like provide information that's useful to both sides that is on brand, so to speak. So finding that was like it wasn't a headache because I never sat down and was like, man, what are we doing here? But it was just kind of like trying to identify where our voice was going to be that really kind of limited what I feel like our growth. Because once I identified that, I was like, cool. Yeah. All systems go. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're about. And it became much clearer, like clarity, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so that probably took place in 15, late 15, early 16.
So a good couple years.
Yeah. And so again, you look at the early material, you're like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know either. We're trying, and we want to, it's not that the information's bad, the material's bad, or I felt I regret it. It's just like, had I known that from the start, to the extent it's possible to know that from the start, maybe it would have been better. But at the same time, like, who's to say? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And this might kind of be out of order with your story here, but I kind of wanted to dive into the athletic part of your story. Sure. And I know you're an elite level athlete. And besides all the impressive numbers that you're putting up, how did this winning mentality come to be? Because obviously you had to have that, at least to some degree.
Yeah. So growing up, I didn't play any of the stick and ball sports. Yeah. My dad raced motocross professionally, and that same story. I just want to impress my dad. I got into racing motorcycles, and I competed at the national level. And that, like, I don't know where the competitive spirit for that like was born out of, except for just like, I knew my dad valued that. I knew I loved my dad, and I really did enjoy riding motorcycles. I didn't actually enjoy riding them casually though. I only liked competing with people, like measuring up, seeing how I stacked up. In any case, I had this weird crash at a race, and I dislocated my hip. I couldn't walk for a number of months. And part of my rehab, I remember this, the PT came to my house and was like, hey, you're gonna need to like strengthen that side. So I was sitting on the couch. She's like, stand up. Okay, now sit down, stand up again, sit down. And so she was like, I need you to do this. I forget how many reps, but you need to do these amount of reps this many times per day. I was like, you just need to do squats. And she's like, yeah, you need to squat, you need to lift weights, you need to get stronger. I'm like, I was 17. And I was like, I'm already strong. What are you talking about? Yeah. So I ended up going to the gym the next day and I was like, oh, let's do squats. And I didn't know that you could squat the empty barbell. I'd never seen anybody do that before, squat the empty barbell. So I just put the 45s on because again, I'd never seen anybody squat anything but plates or more. And I remember I walked it and I was shaking because I was not good at walking at that point, but I was like, this is how you squat. So whatever. And I went down the bottom. I just fell over. There was no hope of ever standing back up. But, and I was like, okay, you can't be this terrible. You got to like get better. And so get home, get on the YouTubes, try to figure out how to lift. And I think in combination with like, I want to always see how I stack up against people and like not having, or maybe having some initial success when I started training appropriately, like my numbers went up and this, that, and the other. And, in the gym, when you're at that point in 2005 or 2006, if you're squatting 500 pounds in a commercial gym, people are like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Who is this guy? And so I kind of like, it's not that I like the attention, but I like I don't know, this guy puts in a bunch of hard work. That's good. More like some moral or social credit, if you will. And yeah, so that's what kind of started my powerlifting career. I was like, oh, I guess I can compete in this. That'll be fun. But yeah, as far as I can remember, I do enjoy like, how do I stack up? Where do I stand? And that knowledge to me kind of is helpful for guiding, like, what do I do next? Because if it's something really important to me, you want to be the best or
100%.
among the best. And if it's not that important to you, then why are you doing it? I mean, there are things that you have to do that aren't important to you, but need to get done. I understand that. But as far as like stuff that you spend a lot of time doing. And so when I was most active in my powerlifting career, I was training, 20, 25 hours a week. That's obviously important. It's a big time sink. You're foregoing other things to do that. Yeah. So if it's important, you got to figure out like, where do you stand? And yeah, I think that started in motocross, went to powerlifting. And now these people are listening to this. They're like, this guy. And now it's golf. I want to play competitive golf this year. I've been in a few tournaments already. So I started playing golf a few years ago and I'm hooked. I think I love it. It's not just like, there are people who recreationally play golf. They're like, I just go out, have a few drinks with my friends, hit the ball around, whatever. Again, I don't enjoy that. It's not fun for me. Like, I want to go out there and I want to play and I want to see how I stack up. I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me, but that's just how I think, man.
Golf, in my opinion, is the most frustrating sport in the entire world. I haven't played in a long time, but I remember I would always be so mad when I wasn't doing well. There's something about golf.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Imagine if you went to the gym, right? And you have all this experience of lifting or whatever, and your numbers were suddenly like cut in half. You're having an off day like you have in golf and you can't hit a ball in the fairway or whatever. It would be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
If you cared. And if you don't care, then I'm like, well, what are you doing here? Yes. So I agree with you. Golf is super frustrating, particularly if you're not playing well. And so I think for me, I didn't want to experience that. I don't want to like go have a terrible time on the golf course. So I got to get better and again, see how I stack up. And I don't know. People who listen to this are probably like, man, that sounds intense. I'm really not. There are a handful of things that I really care about, but in every one of those things, I want to be either the best or among the best or the best that I can be. That's kind of like, let me fully manifest my physical potential or mental potential or whatever, or potential in a given thing. And I don't know. That's just what I do. Yeah.
Have you seen the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan?
Yeah.
You're like that's his mind right there for basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really similar.
People are like, when I tell them my name, Jordan, they're like, oh, like Michael Jordan. I'm like, yeah, just like less attractive, less talented, less, financially well off. But yeah, sure. Same guy.
Same thing. Right.
Yeah. It's funny.
And did you bring kind of that same mentality into medical school?
So I felt like the biggest difference was like I felt like I had a chip on my shoulder in medical school. So the way medical application, like medical school and getting in and matriculating works in the United States, usually after undergrad, you take the MCAT, you apply. There's about 10 to 13,000 people who apply for 100 and some change different schools, and each school has anywhere between like 50 to 150 different spots. So about 10% of the people who apply get in every year. And so you got to be within the top 10% to matriculate. And my originally, like I had zero chance of getting in undergrad. I did not do that. I didn't want to go to medical school. So I didn't have that same sort of like, I need to like succeed and have the highest grades or whatever. So I actually went back and did this master's program and at St. Louis University. It was in clinical anatomy and physiology. And during that was sort of a prep to like get you ready for medical school, in addition to getting some letters of recommendation from the medical school faculty at St. Louis U. And they just beat it into our brains like, this is going to be hard for you to get in. Like almost like you're not worthy of getting in and you have to do this extra step. And so I had this like chip on my shoulder, like I'm going to show you. And so I did really well in my master's program. I got honors across the board, which is like the master's version of a 4.0. I got into medical school, and I think I had grinded so hard in my master's program. That's when I really learned how to study, really learned how to like focus, particularly on academic work. I crushed, medical school. Like and the again, this is going to sound weird, but I don't think that I was spending as much time on my schoolwork in medical school as my peers were, but I was doing better than them because I had kind of figured this out, like how to study, how to prioritize, how to be time efficient. And I took great pride in that. I was like, you guys are grinding so hard in the library or whatever, and I'm, going out of town for a fun weekend, and I can still, like, when we measure up, when the test comes, like, we're doing this thing. And it didn't mean that I was better than them in any way. I still value them as friends, and I'm really excited to see how their careers have gone. But for me, like, how do you stay motivated or whatever? It's like, it's a competition. It's like, I don't know, again, probably some sort of maladaptive psychology in there, but like, that's whatever it takes for me to like get up to that level. And that's kind of how I leverage that.
I love that. I love that competitive mentality through school.
Yeah, there's like this derogatory term that I think started in law school. It's called a gunner. It's like, oh, you're trying to like get the highest grade, like wreck the curve, the teacher's favorite student, get the correct clerking job or whatever. And that has transferred over to medicine, where you try to honors every course and get the highest remarks or whatever. And it's almost derogatory because it's like, you're just trying too hard, or you're, suck up or whatever. And I could understand that, because a lot of times, particularly 20 years ago in medical school, that was like a developmental time in people's lives. They were 22, 21, 22, 23 through, 4 years. They're learning how to be an adult. They're growing as a person. They're making lifelong friendships, this, that, and the other. I understand all of that. So like, if you're focused 100% on school and you're trying to like beat everybody else, then maybe you miss out on some of that. But for me, I was 27 when I started medical, or 26 when I started medical school. I had already done that sort of developmental period. That would, for me, happen during the master's program and when I was running the gym. So I was able to still make lifelong friendships and kind of have that experience, but I don't know. I wasn't developing as quickly, as rapidly as the other students from, like, cause I was older,
Right.
And so, so for me, it was like, how can I get as much work done in the shortest period of time to achieve the best outcome? Which just made sense to me, because I was like, I want to do other stuff. I want to go to the gym. I want to train for hours on end. I want to go out of town. I want to go on this trip. I want to, travel, whatever. So, it's almost a derogatory term when people say, oh, they're just a gunner. And it's like, I mean, if your grades don't matter to you, then what does it matter what somebody else is doing? Right? Like, if that's not the trajectory that you want. But for a lot of people, yeah, it does matter. And when I was trying to get into a residency program, so in the United States, after during your fourth year of medical school, they effectively, you build a resume. Here are your grades. Here are your board scores. Here are all the things that make you a competitive or uncompetitive candidate for a particular residency. And the more selective the residency, which tend to be the higher paying or better geographical location residencies, you need higher scores and higher marks. And so I knew right away, I was like, I want to go to California. I want to for residency. I want to go to, UCLA, UCSD, Stanford, because I want to be on the West Coast. I want to be in an academic powerhouse. And I knew that they were going to be competitive. So for me to set myself up for success, I knew that I needed high marks. And so if that was gunning, like, okay, but I'm not going to not do that.
Right.
Just to like not be that guy. I don't know. I think there's a difference between like trying hard and having that be important to you and being an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that I was, I wasn't conniving. I wasn't like telling people, oh yeah, the test actually starts at 10 a.m. when it was 9:30. No, I wasn't doing any of that. If people wanted my notes, if people wanted to know how I was studying, like that's fine. Equal opportunity. But yeah, I did want to try hard. I did want to get good scores and good grades. And that's what I did.
It just seems like you built really good systems for yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think I credit that to the master's program because I didn't really know how to study in a way that was productive for me. I remember in undergrad, I would like, oh, I'm just going to read the textbook, which for some people, they read it. Cool. So other people in lecture, if they take notes and review their notes and make like flow charts or whatever, that they, conceptual mapping, that works for them. For me, I found that this spaced repetition learning was like key. And so in the simplest terms, you would have either flashcards or questions that you would make to ask yourself. And if you knew it really, really well, like boom, right off the top of your head, knew everything about it, you're not going to see that question or that topic again for some period of time. So for me, it was 90 days. I wouldn't see it again for 3 months. Knowing that at the end of the semester, at the end of the year, there'd be this cumulative exam or there'd be on the boards or something. But if I didn't know it, I'd see it tomorrow when I studied again. And the idea is like, based on what your needs are, your individual needs for learning, what you do remember, don't remember, that's how you're going to like set up these concepts. And so I learned that during my master's program. So when I got into med school, I was like, cool, I got this. Let's do the same thing. It's fired up again.
And was everything really fast paced when you're in medical school?
Yeah, yes and no. Their first like class, the orientation thing, they're like, medical school is like drinking from a fire hose, and it's like,
yep, I've heard that a bunch.
Yeah, thrown at you. And then the next guy comes on and he's like, half of what we teach you is going to be wrong by the time you graduate. The problem is we don't know which half. And you're like, Jesus Christ, sounds terrible. The first year of medical school had a lot of overlap with my master's program. So I wasn't overwhelmed initially, even though I'd moved across the country and whatever. And there was some different stuff, but there was enough overlap where I didn't feel like this is an overwhelming amount of material. Second year was completely new. You were building off concepts, yes, from the first year, but it's more integrative stuff. So pathophysiology, et cetera, which is like, cool, all these facts about anatomy, immunology, biochemistry, et cetera. Let's put it together in a clinical setting. And the questions got different. Instead of it being like just rote memorization, it was like, how do you integrate all this different information together to answer a secondary or tertiary question? It'd be like a patient with specific disease who got prescribed this medication, blah, blah, blah. And it's not like what the medication was or what the disease was, that, it was what's the most common side effect or something. And you're like, okay. So that, yes, was a lot of information. What I found to be the most useful was trying to identify what was the most useful information. In medicine, that was what's going to pop up on boards and what's going to be relevant later clinically, which is usually what's on boards in general. So a lot of the lectures are taught by PhD researchers or MD PhDs. So they also do research and are also clinicians. And invariably there would be, in each lecture, there would be 10 to 20 slides of their pet research project, something in rats or mice or whatever that like has not made its way to the clinical bedside yet. And you're like, okay, so this is like very new, not going to be on boards. It's probably going to be on the test that we take in school, which is ultimately less important than how you do on boards. So I'm not going to learn any of that. I'm going to like skip it and know that I'm going to get a question or two wrong on the test, but I'm not going to fill my brain with the what I call TWUDs. So time wasted on useless detail. It's not that the research isn't interesting or that they're bad people for researching this. It's just ultimately not important. Some people listen to this are like, oh, so you're just studying for the test. You're learning, and I'm like, well, in a way, yeah, because that's what we're incentivized to do. Is it the best way to go about setting up medical education? Well, I don't know that, but I'm not in charge of that either. So like we all agreed to play the game by the same rules. And so got to play the game,
Yeah. Did you ever get to a point like, especially after that second year where you felt like you were going to fail? Did it reach that point at all?
Yeah. So we had this behavioral psychology class that had most of the other classes, like every 3 or 4 weeks, there'd be a test. And then you'd have midterm and you have a final. This was a year-long course, and there was one midterm, which was in the middle of the year, and then one final, and each counted for half your grade. And there was a class once every 2 weeks, and the class was at like 3 p.m. on a Friday, and you're like, and there's no attendance being taken, and the classes were 2.5 hours long or something. And I was like, I'm not going to this. There's no way. I'll just read the book or whatever, or look at the slides. Well, this particular instructor who taught the course, great person, by the way. I worked with them on my psychiatry rotation, but in class, his slides would be like 10 slides long and just pictures. And you're like, what the heck are they trying to teach here? I can't discern this from the book. There's no syllabus really. So the first test I got, I failed it. I never failed a test outside of undergrad, like one test before. So this was like the second time in my life I was like, wait, what just happened? And this is 50% of my grade. And if I don't pass this class, like I can't move on, like whatever. So I thought at that point, I was like, this is it. This is how I fail out of medical school. I'm not going to make it, just like everyone thought I wasn't. And, they were right. I'm not cut out. I mean, you have those thoughts, right? But then I was like, I just need to try harder, which I know again, you're like, oh yeah, just try harder. But it's like, I'm obviously not prioritizing this. I'm not putting the time in. I'm not learning the right stuff, which is why that was reflected in my poor grade. So how do I do this? Okay, I can watch the lectures online if I don't want to go to the class. I can make sure that what I'm reading from the book or reading from the boards prep material that I'm doing is accurate. And yeah, I got a 95 or 96 something percent on the final, and did not fail out of medical school, and it was fine. But yeah, that was the point where I was like, oh, this is real. I could really not make it. After that, I don't really remember anything else until during intern year in residency, where I didn't think I was going to fail from like lack of effort or trying or like knowledge. It was just, I was so burnt. I mean, I was working 80 plus hours a week. I can't say it on, officially that I was working more than 80 hours because that's the time restriction, but it was, 80 plus. And then Barbell Medicine was still going, and I was trying to do that. And I was still trying to compete in powerlifting. I was burning at both ends, and I was like, I can't do it. How do I do it? I don't know that I can. I didn't see a clear way out. And then it got to I kept just trying to force it. And I ended up with this really gnarly hip injury, and I couldn't really train as much. And so I was just irritable. I wasn't sleeping. Anyway, the whole point was I didn't find a solution to the problem. I kind of accepted, like, yeah, sometimes it's going to be like that. It's going to be hard. That's your hard road. Like the path to where you want to go is not always going to be smooth and linear or whatever. You're going to have some ups and downs. This is a down. If you accept it, you're going to be less bothered by it. So let's go. And I think also having a great support system around me. I had friends who were in the same position. Austin, he's another guy at Barbell Medicine. He was like, yeah, I remember those days. Like, there's nothing you can do. You just keep going. Just don't stop. And I don't know. I don't pretend that medicine and exercise, like training, none of this is like, we're going to war, we're going to battle. Look, these are all first world, problems. Like, oh, I couldn't train as much as I wanted to, or I couldn't, I had occupational difficulties in a very privileged, I get it. Right. But it doesn't mean it wasn't hard for me. It was. So.
And after you're done with everything, did everything kind of after that in life feel a little bit easier?
100%. Yeah. After residency, so I was in LA, and I was like, I hate LA. Not because, look, if you live in LA and you love it, that's great. I love it. I love that for you. But I mean, I couldn't live there. I was driving 30 miles a day to different clinical rotation sites, which is incompatible with life in LA. It's just not going to work. So I moved to Santa Cruz, which is this like beach town, Northern California. I was like skateboarding everywhere, whatever. And I was like, all I was doing was barbell medicine full time. And I was like, not only am I way more passionate about this particular project, but I don't have all these extra like stressors. It felt like I was on vacation. It still feels like I'm on vacation. It's like every day when I wake up, today I woke up, I got maybe 7 hours of sleep last night. And I woke up and I was like mad at myself. I'm like, why? You could have slept much longer. But I was like, no, and I'm excited to go to work. And it feels, even during periods of time where I'm working on a lot of different projects and I got deadlines and, this, that, and the other, it still feels like, man, I made it. I did it. This is awesome. And it does not compare at all to like that impending dread and doom and just, oh man, feeling like I was overcooked just a few years ago. So I don't know that I've crossed the hump where things are going to keep getting easier or whatever, but it's certainly right now, life's pretty sweet, and I'm grateful for it.
And sorry, I missed a part. You said when you were in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
When were you in Santa Cruz?
I lived in Santa Cruz 2017 to 2019. Yeah, okay. Before I moved to San Diego.
So, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I was born in San Jose, so I was
okay,
yeah, and I lived up in the Bay Area for almost 20 years. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I did notice too, a lot of your roles and accomplishments. There's a lot of leadership that's involved in that. So I wanted to ask you what you think makes a good leader. And this could be an athlete, a doctor, or someone even starting a business.
Sure. I think when I reflect on people that have had a really beneficial impact on my life from like a role where they were the superior and I was the, subordinate, I find that in general, they're very clear about, here are my expectations. Here's how I'm going to help you. Here's how I can help you. And here are the things that you're going to be responsible for on your own. Effectively making things very clear. Like, here's what I want you to do. Here's how I'm going to help you do those things. And here's what you yourself are going to have to do. I think it gets, when I've had attending physicians or coaches or, just anybody in a position of power over me, that I felt like it just added stress to my life and didn't really benefit me. It's like, because I felt their expectations were continually changing. I couldn't figure out what do you want? And how can I give you what you want? That'd be one thing. And then how does me giving you what you want benefit me also? Like if I'm in a learning role, for example, I was like, okay, I can do this thing, but is this benefiting me in any way? Because if you don't see that connection, it's hard for you to get motivated to really try your best. So I think in leadership, and then in my company, we have a lot of people working for us. I also find that talking to people in a way that gives them options to do what you want them to do, express themselves in a way that fits their personality. So we have, for instance, we want people to write articles all the time, create content or videos or segments for our newsletter. And I tell them, when they're writing something, like, don't write it like you're me or Austin or whatever, because you're not. You're your own individual person. You have your own individual experiences. I want your take on it. All this information that we're putting out, there's nothing really new under the sun. It's just coming from a different angle, different perspective to try to reach that person that we couldn't reach before or hasn't been reached before. And so put your personality on it, allowing folks to express themselves rather than putting them in this rigid box. So in residency, this is so great. I was on a pediatric rotation. This person was a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic, and they were either 12 or 13, so very young, very, 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 very overweight. And so, they were in the hospital because they were in diabetic ketoacidosis. And so once they were a little bit better, you're like, all right, so they got to see the diet. There's just a standard of care. They're like diabetes educator to talk to them about diet and, using diabetes medications, et cetera. But again, the lifestyle thing is very rarely addressed inpatient in the hospital, just usually from a time perspective, but then also expertise, because who's gonna do it, right? if the diabetes educator does it, it's, yeah, you got to exercise and eat better, and here's how you eat better, but they don't talk about exercise specifically. But the attending physician, the person in charge, was like, Jordan, you're the exercise guy, you're the fitness guy, like, you know this stuff. He had actually checked out, like taken a personal interest in some of the barbell medicine stuff. He's like, see what you can do if you can set up a family meeting where you're going to talk to the family about exercise habits, dietary habits, or whatever, and see if you can, really put your personal spin on this. And so I remember I got so excited. I was like, I'm going to do the best job here or whatever. And even though that was one patient out of the hundreds that we saw on that rotation, like that brought me closer to them. And maybe I always wanted to do a good job for them. I always wanted to like show up and be like very prepared, because I was like, this person went out of their way, took an interest in me, allowed myself to express myself personally in the setting. And that made me respect them a lot more. And so, yeah, in a leadership role, I'm like, you need to earn the respect. It's not, in the medical field, it's almost like you just have to give it regardless. But it's like, I feel like if you want the commensurate relationship, earn the respect, set the expectations, and then allow people to express themselves, let them be themselves. So that's been my experience. I'm sure somebody who's an expert in leadership has a different, more eloquent way to say that, but that's been my experience.
Awesome. And any vision for Barbell Medicine that you can share with the listeners?
Sure. Yeah. Going forward again, when in 2016, you kind of identified like where we're at in the space, and there seems to be this large need for a formal education or somewhat formal education curriculum for development, both for medical professionals and fitness professionals. So the idea was, all right, we need to make some sort of adult learning certification process to get health medical professionals up to speed on all this stuff, and fitness professionals. So we're working on developing our certification program for both of those folks right now. That'll be worth CEUs for people with existing certifications, or CMEs for existing physicians.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So that's the idea. Like, that's where we're going forward. We want to be one of the top educational companies in both spaces. And I think the other part on top of that is I want to grow. So we're just kind of in this hiring frenzy. If we get well-qualified people, we want more coaches, we want more registered dietitians, we want more medical professionals. Because initially that was not the case. We're not hiring anyway. We're like, well, we're not big enough yet or whatever. But what has happened, what I've learned is that getting more people allows us to grow faster rather than growing first and then finding the people. So having more hands on deck it's the opposite of what I thought it was. But again, no business training in medical school. So bigger, more education. And then I also want a sort of open source kind of element to what we're doing. So I don't want to have affiliate program where it's like, oh, you're associated with Barbell Medicine, you're a Barbell Medicine certified physician or coach or whatever. Like, I want people to be able to access this information anywhere in the world in any different language for free, open source, use it, because that's how you affect change en masse, like in a large swath of the population. So we have translators now trying to get our articles into Spanish and Chinese right now. We're going to try to expand that to other languages as we find people who are interested in this. But yeah, that's the next goal.
Awesome. I'm really excited to, see what you guys are going to keep doing. I'll make sure to, keep following you guys on all your social medias, and really excited. Sure. And so Dr. Feigenbaum, this is the last part of the show, and I will give you the floor again for a few minutes. You've done so many different things in your life. You've had a lot of success. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about some of the underlying skills that you learned to be so successful, maybe some, for some takeaways for listeners.
Sure. Well, I had to start by saying I'm just grateful that this whole thing worked out, because I do feel like, preparation meets opportunity. Like, that's how this works. I can't you just work hard enough and good things are going to happen. Yeah. But you got to have some luck along the way, and nobody gets there alone. So a lot of great mentors along the way. So the two biggest things that I think have helped me. One, having mentors at every step of the way, just people who've been there before or in similar positions that can, kind of, I call it steepening the learning curve, because if you have a really steep learning curve, you're going to achieve more faster than if it's really relatively flat. And then also just deciding or figuring out what you actually want to do. One of my mentors said this to me. He said, Jordan, you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything. And I said, that's the most philosophical thing you've ever said to me, but it's true.
That's good.
I think it's fine to have a wide variety of interests. That's great. But I also think that if you truly want to be great and successful in a particular area or an area, you're going to have to pick a specific area to focus on. Ideally, there's a lot of experimentation with, do I like this? Does it like me? Do I have a predilection for this? And then you sort of identify like, oh, yeah, this is a good fit. And then you go all in towards that, mainly so you don't dilute yourself to a point of irrelevancy. And so I wanted to previously do everything in the health and fitness space. So we want to be the best coaches. We want to be the best doctors. But you can't do both and then ride that fence in the middle. And so the reality is we're not the best doctors. We're not the best coaches for every sport across sports. What we are the best at is combining those two things together. And we can be the best at that. And so pedal to the metal, let's do that. It's a little scary at first because you're like, wait, I'm just going to do the one thing. It's like, well, if you want to be the best at the thing, like you're going to have to pick. So,
where can people connect with you?
Sure. So across all the social medias, Barbell Medicine. So on Instagram, it's Barbell_Medicine. My personal account's Jordan_Barbell Medicine. On YouTube, we're Barbell Medicine. We also have a podcast, the Barbell Medicine Podcast, which is not surprising to anyone. On Facebook, Barbell Medicine, we have a group. We're getting close to 20,000 members. If you want to come interact with us, that's cool. We have a website, barbellmedicine.com. There's a forum on there if you want to interact via that or read any of our articles. Yeah, if you Google Barbell Medicine, things are going to pop up. Hopefully mostly positive things, but yeah.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link those in the show description. And thank you everyone for listening to the Mission Driven Made podcast. If you found value in this, please subscribe to the show. It only takes about 30 seconds or so. Leave a 5-star review, and then most importantly, share it with one friend today. We just love the support. And I've mentioned it to you guys the last few weeks, but we're developing some impactful courses for you, among other things. So we can't wait to launch those in the future. And Dr. Feigenbaum, thanks again for taking the time out of your day to bring all this value to the listeners today. We appreciate it so much. Until next time, everyone, stay mission driven. All right. And